And tonight on the Radio Horror Show, we have from Dark Horse Comics, one of their writers and the editor in chief. We have Scott Allie on the show. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Scott.
Thank you.
Scott was on the show with us way back when we first started Radio of Horror, which was 8 years ago coming up. So he was on a couple times, once in 2008 and 9, and it's great to finally have him back on the show. And he's been working on several comics for Dark Horse and also being the editor-in-chief since 2012, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I always love talking about, Scott, is comic book history. That's one thing that I don't know about Dark Horse is, and maybe you can give us a little bit of background, is how did Dark Horse get started?
Dark Horse was founded in 1986 by Mike Richardson. Mike had opened up a comic book store, which grew into a chain of comic book stores. They were originally called Pegasus Books. They were still called that in '86 when he did the first issue of Dark Horse Presents with Randy Stradley. That was the first comic that Dark Horse Comics did, and they literally put it together at the shop, at the Pegasus shop in Northeast Portland. And they published that, and they debuted it at San Diego that year, and it was a big hit. It was during the black and white boom, and from that anthology comic, they grew into a lot of different things. At first, it was all creator-owned comics. Original stuff like Boris the Bear and Concrete and Black Cross and Trekker. And before too long, they started doing licensed stuff and manga. Within just a few years, Godzilla, which was both, it was licensed and it was manga the first time we did it, I believe. And then we did the Aliens comics, which became really huge. And in my opinion, they sort of changed the way that people looked at licensed comics.
You guys are definitely big into the independent book stuff, and which is great about Dark Horse, and I think that's been one of your most strongest things about your company. You guys also do a lot of property rights stuff, like stuff from Fox, like Aliens, Predator, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Which is easier to publish for Dark Horse? Is it the independent stuff or the copywritten stuff?
It's a mix. I mean, with the creator-owned stuff, the original comic stuff like Hellboy, we do a lot of books like that, and there you're only dealing with the people who make the comic. And so there's a certain ease in that, With the licensed stuff, you got to hire people to make the comics, and then you're dealing with a corporation that owns and controls it. And so there's a level of bureaucracy there that's a lot different. But when you're dealing with one of those movie properties or TV properties, there's also a built-in audience. And so that gives you a certain leg up over launching something brand new, totally original. When Mike Mignola went out on a limb and created Hellboy, it was a long time ago now, but at the time, he had no way of knowing that it was going to be a success. Anytime that a creator puts their all into launching something brand new, that's a gamble, and it's a gamble for the publisher too. I mean, it's all a gamble because publishing is risky business, but yeah, the creators kind of going out, investing in themselves and having faith in themselves is a big challenge for them and for the publisher. So there's, for me, it changes different years. I find myself enjoying different things more, but it's all, to do anything good, it's all difficult. There's more bureaucracy doing a licensed thing, and more, you're going it alone more if you're doing an original thing.
Abe Sapien is a book that you're currently on right now, which I don't read, I'll admit, but I'm a big fan of Hellboy. What's happening in the Abe Sapien book?
Hellboy died a while ago, and he's in hell. And around the time that he died, this plague of monsters was kind of overrunning the world, and the BPRD has been dealing with that really heavily for quite a while now. Things got really bad about 5 years ago, and people started looking at Abe and looking at the monsters that were overrunning the world and thinking, Abe, you look like maybe you have something in common with them. And someone who was very convinced of that shot Abe, certain that he was actually the one bringing about all this trouble. Abe went into a coma and transformed into an even more bizarre-looking creature. And when he came out of it, he realized the writing was on the wall that too many people were blaming him for this stuff, and he needed to go find the truth out about himself and about what was happening in the world. So he went AWOL, and he's been running across America trying to figure out what's going on and what his connection to these monsters are. And actually, just this afternoon, I was working on Abe issue 31. where right around there, a lot of the answers start coming out for him, and he starts finding out finally what he's really all about. Because Abe's origins were more of a mystery than Hellboy's origins for the longest time. And even when we found out how he came to be, we didn't know why he came to be, and we're finally revealing that now in the Abe Sapien Monthly.
There's another Hellboy book that takes place in that same time period, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the current run of Mignola books, Hellboy in Hell, BPRD Hell on Earth, and Abe Sapien, those are all taking place right now. And then we always do a number of different books set in the past. Like we've got Lobster Johnson set in the 30s, and we're doing Hellboy and the BPRD about his earliest days with the Bureau in the 1950s.
There was another book that I was really, really into. Was you guys were doing Hellboy like animated books a few years back based on the animated 2 movies that you guys did? Those were really cool.
Yeah, Ben Stenbeck drew 1 or 2 of those, and from there he moved into the main Mignola books. He did Witchfinder for us, and then Baltimore, and now he's working on the Hellboy in the 1950s books. But yeah, the animated books were tied into the animated show, or the animated movies, I guess, which they only made 2 of, and then that was kind of that.
Kind of unfortunate. I wish they'd made more, because those were really good, and they also came with little Hellboy comics too, which were original to the DVD, which is kind of cool. Right. And now there's all this talk about a Hellboy movie 3, which would be kind of great, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking before this started, like movies are great for selling comics. The Hellboy 3 movie, you know, Ron Perlman's been talking about that a lot in different interviews and saying radically different things from one interview to the next.
I noticed that.
So there's, you know, that kind of tells you where that's at. There's nothing right now, but you never know.
We were making jokes about comic book movies, me and a friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, you know who I have on the show?" And I said, "You." And then he was like, "Oh, hey, wow, they made a couple of Hellboy movies, didn't they?" And I was like, "Yes, they did. They also had, I think, a couple other films based on Dark Horse related properties, because I know that logo has come up before." And I was like, "Why can't they make a Fantastic Four movie," which bombed out of the box office this weekend, and I saw and was dreadful, with as much passion, huh?
You saw it?
Oh my god, dude! Just before we did this interview, I saw it.
That must have been terrible.
It is so awful.
Yeah.
And I was saying to him, why can't they make a Fantastic Four movie with as much passion as Guillermo del Toro did with Hellboy? Because Hellboy, the movie, is fantastic if you read the comic.
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, the thing was Guillermo was at a place in his career that Josh Trank is not at. You know, Guillermo had a lot of success, and so the studio was willing to give him a lot of money and a lot of room. And that's the thing. I think with some of these movies, you get filmmakers who are given a lot of money and a lot of room to do their own thing, and they do something great, like Guardians or the first Avengers movie, and, you know, even the first Iron Man movie. What's the director's name?
He played Happy Hogan in the movie too, the driver,
right.
Jon Favreau.
Jon Favreau, yeah. But you got great filmmakers who are given the freedom to really do something, and it sounds like, I mean, this was only Josh Trank's second movie, right?
Correct, behind Chronicle.
Right, and I never saw that, but I heard it was really good. And
it's like the Russo brothers who directed Captain America: The Winter Soldier, a much better movie than the first Avenger, and now they're going to be directing the next 2 Avenger movies, the Infinity War Part 1 and 2.
Oh, cool!
Because they were so successful with Winter Soldier, and there's something that very rarely happens, or whatever. I mean, as good as the first Avenger was, it wasn't as great as the Winter Soldier, and the Winter Soldier was definitely more grounded in reality with how we feel about the government today. But yeah, Fantastic Four was awful, dude. Just don't go see it. It was just
no fear of that.
It was just everything wrong about superhero movies is in that movie.
Right.
And I actually asked some audience members, and I'm a film reviewer and a comic book reviewer. I was like, "Did you like the movie?" "Oh yeah, I thought it was great." "Why did you think it was great?" "Oh, I just thought it was exciting. I like escaping to an alternate reality. I mean, if you didn't like it, that's fine. You can go see another movie." I was like, "When was the last movie you saw?" "About a year and a half ago." I was like, "Okay." What are the top 5 books that Dark Horse is putting out that you would love to recommend to people to try and pick up? Put you on the spot with that one.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think just this week we launched a book called "This Damned Band" by Paul Cornell and Tony Parker that I'm really stoked about. It's a supernatural. I don't think it goes so far as to be satire parody, but it's definitely got like a sense of humor about it. But it deals with rock bands and Satanism in the 1970s, or maybe it's late 60s, but I think it's 70s, and that's a book that I've been excited about that launched to great reviews, and so I'm really stoked about that one. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff right now. To my passion project right now that was a huge launch for us in May is Fight Club. We're doing the sequel to Fight Club with Chuck Palahniuk. I'm really proud of that. The whole team on that is doing an extraordinary job. So I think everybody needs to be picking that up. Mind Management is just about to conclude. I think the final issue of Mind Management, which has been one of our most critically acclaimed books in years, the final issue of that comes out very soon, and everybody should pick that up from the beginning and read the whole thing. It'll be 6 volumes in all, and that's really really terrific work by Matt Kint. How many is that?
I think that's 4, maybe.
That yeah, I mean then the whole Mignola library. Pick up all the Mignola stuff. Actually, like to stick to new stuff. Actually, Lady Killer was a standalone 5-issue series that we did earlier this year. The trade paperback's about to come out, and we're going to roll into a second series. And this was a book that literally the first time I heard about it, I was at a party at Mike Oeming's house. My wife ran up to me and told me that Joelle Jones was working on a new original series, and this is what it is. Joelle was elsewhere at the party. She had just told Elizabeth about it, and basically Elizabeth told it to me as it's Betty Draper as Dexter.
Oh, wow.
Like, that's pretty interesting. And so I got together with Joelle later during the week, and we had a great talk, and we wound up doing the book, and it was a big hit for us. It was a book that nobody had big expectations about, and then once it came out, it sold out immediately. Great reviews, great response, and yeah, the trade comes out really soon, and it's a great weird look at the early '60s through a very violent lens.
Another book that I read through the hardcover. I still need to get the second volume, The Strain. I love what you guys have done with The Strain. Good stuff.
Yeah. That's a unique opportunity with a book like that because we've got that long-standing relationship with Guillermo. He came out to Portland, and Mike Richardson, the owner of the company, the publisher, he and I had lunch with Guillermo and one of his guys, and we talked through what we might do with the book. At the time, the TV show wasn't at all a done deal. Like, Guillermo was talking about it, but we didn't know there'd ever be a TV show.
Yeah.
And I think when we met, the third and final novel was just about to come out.
Uh-huh.
So we started working on those comics around the time the last book came out. And it was great because with a partner like Guillermo, who gets comics so well and had total control over the property with his partner on it, Chuck Hogan, Guillermo came to us and worked with David Lapham, the writer on the book, and Mike Huddleston, the artist on the book, and he collaborated with them in such a way that even though we were basically adapting the novels, Guillermo gave us a lot of fresh material, and he really helped us make the comics their own thing that were true to his original vision. And I believe it was Guillermo who suggested the cover artist, Eric Gist, who's just an amazing painter, and really helped with Huddleston to bring that whole world to life. But Sierra Hahn, an editor at Dark Horse who recently moved to Boom, Sierra worked with Guillermo really closely to build the whole program, develop the whole program, and now Jim Gibbons is editing that program and working with Guillermo. We're heading toward the conclusion. The adaptation of the end of the third novel is coming up pretty soon, and then we have more stuff that we're going to be doing with Guillermo and The Strain after that.
I noticed the one thing I did notice. You're right; it did come out before the TV series, and it was popular. But man, when that TV series came out, I never seen issue number zeros or free comic book day issues go up on eBay so fast. It was the first issue was like $1. That's what it was, and they went on eBay so fast for so much money. It was ridiculous. It must have had people like flooding to the comic book stores to buy this comic book.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that might be a theme of our conversation is that movies and TV do a hell of a lot to sell comics. Yeah, the Strain numbers were okay before the show, but once the show launched about a year ago now, the sales in the comic shops picked up, and they really spiked in the book market. We had 2 trades out by then, I think, and right around the time of the release of the debut of the TV series, we put out a hardcover collecting the first 2 trades,
Yes.
which was the equivalent of the first novel, and
I have
yeah,
that.
it did gangbusters.
Yeah, I like that hardcover. As soon as I saw that, I picked that up. I still need to get the second one, The Fall, and I'm in the middle of the TV show. I love it. I read all 3 novels, so I'm like very knowledgeable. So, and this show is great. I mean, do you watch
Yeah,
it?
yeah, the show's terrific, and I think don't they have they've got a long commitment on the show because everybody wants to be in business with Guillermo, so they're going to invest deeply on making this thing work.
And he directed the first episode, and they said that as long as the show obviously keeps getting picked up by FX, which FX is really good with shows, I've noticed. They don't like cancel shows after a season. Season 2 and 3 are going to be based on book 2, and then seasons 4 and 5 will be based on the third and final novel, which is great. Don't go on forever and ever and ever. If that's your plan, then
Right.
that's your plan. And plus, you obviously have other characters that you put into the show that are not in the book and not in the comics. So you got to work them, their plot lines through and stuff like that. The one thing I just can't stand is they replace Zach, and I cannot stand the new actor who plays him. He's
Yeah.
not as fun as the last season. Child actors are very difficult. I understand that. I mean, we had this whole revolution with Carl on The Walking Dead, and that actor has gotten better and better, thankfully. But for the most part, I love the cast. It's great. We've actually had the actor who played the Master on the show.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, and we were supposed to have Kevin Durant, but that kind of fell through. I've once in a while I'm able to get a hold of Chuck Hogan, but we're not able to connect very well to have him on the show. So I'll keep trying on that because obviously Del Toro would be impossible, but the writer of the actual novels, Chuck Hogan, would be a lot easier.
Is Chuck in Massachusetts?
Chuck was supposed to. Okay, funny story. 2 years ago, as you know, Massachusetts has been bombarded with snowstorms, and like this year we had
Right.
110 inches. 2 years ago, we also had a bad whopping snowstorm, and it canceled his book signing. I was so upset
Yeah.
because I was so waiting for that Saturday to go there. I had all 3 books ready for him to sign, and we got walloped with snow.
Yeah, it was a brutal winter.
Oh yeah, you don't know. It was bad. And of course, another favorite book of mine you guys put out is Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. I think I don't know what has happened from the first season that you guys did, season 8. It was it.
Season-
Yeah. I think the books have gotten 1,000 times better since season 8. They were okay in
Right.
season 8, but the consensus with a lot of fans is like they are just so well written now, and the art
That's
is
awesome.
spot on.
Yeah.
Do you hear that?
I mean, I hear different things. Buffy fans are really passionate, and so they come on with strong opinions, and those opinions go in every direction,
Of course.
equally with equal passion. So it really ranges. But that's good to hear. I mean, I love where we're at with the books now. Those books also, after a while, I mean, I edited that stuff for 17 years or something, and then Sierra took over about a year ago, just like The Strain. Sierra did it for a while, and now Jim Gibbons is the editor on that. So I'm not as involved. Now, I launched season 10, and now it's changed hands a couple times since then. But yeah, Victor Gischler, we brought him in to do a Spike miniseries, and that worked out really well. So he became the writer on Angel and Faith, and Chris Gage, man, Chris Gage was somebody who really showed up and did an incredible job when he wrote Angel and Faith during season 9, and him and Rebecca Isaacs together just did such fantastic work that we told them, you guys can do whatever you want to do. If you want to stay on Angel, you can have that. If you want to move to Buffy, you can have the flagship title. And after kind of much deliberation, they decided that they wanted to tackle Buffy, and I think what they've done with it has been phenomenal. I couldn't be happier. I love working with Chris, love working with Rebecca. The cover artist on the book, Steve Morris, is phenomenal, brings an incredible amount of imagination and vision and imagery to the book. And Dan Jackson is the perfect colorist for Rebecca. Dan is a guy who worked on staff at Dark Horse a long time ago before going freelance, and he colors The Strain, and he colors Rebecca on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Now, how much involvement does Joss Whedon have with the book now? I know there was a big thing with him when it launched a few years ago, but he's become so Mr. Hollywood with the Avengers. how much is this still his story? What he
He
intended?
when we did season 8, he was really guiding the story, and he was really editing the story. I mean, he was hiring the writers. We were going over it together, but it was really him driving that train. And then when we launched season 9, he knew he wasn't going to have the time to do it to the same degree. So we launched it with this writers summit at his house, and we got Chris Gage there, and we got some of the former writers of Buffy, the TV show, and some other folks to show up, and we kind of broke down the whole season in that one day, figured out the overall plan, and Joss directed that. Joss, steered it, and then along the way, whenever we had questions, we would go to him, and that's basically been the way it is with season 10. We did a writers summit in LA as season 9 was wrapping up, so that we could plan season 10 and then write the final issues of season 9 knowing where we were going. So that was helpful. But yeah, season 10, everything that we've done so far in season 10 and up through the ending came from a writer's summit that Joss ran, and Jane Espenson was there, and me, and Chris Gage, Victor Gischler, Drew Greenberg, and a number of other folks.
The one of my favorite things you guys put out was that Spike one shot that took place, I think, during season 7. That was great.
That James wrote.
Yeah, that was great. That was so fantastic.
That was great. That was the first. I think it was the first time I met James. We were doing a panel at San Diego a few years ago, and we were hanging out backstage before the panel, and he said, "I got this idea for a Spike graphic novel," and he told me the story. Just as we were sitting there, he told me the story in 5 minutes, and it was one of those things where, like, in just a 5-minute synopsis of it, I knew that he had the whole thing. And the thing I liked about it was that it was a very personal look at Spike. There wasn't there wasn't an apocalypse to put off. There wasn't any big earth-shaking events like that. It was just this really personal thing about Spike, this kind of one night in the life of this guy, from a guy who certainly knows the character from a unique point of view.
Yeah, of course.
So it was exciting to be able to do it, and he was actually really easy to work with, a real prince about the whole thing. And yeah, he was very kind of generous with the artist, and it was a great experience.
I love the fact you guys are the holders of the Whedonverse, because you also did the Dr. Horrible sing-along blog one-shot, and you're the continuation of Firefly, of course, and Dollhouse. Right. It's like the canceled Whedonverse, which is all these shows were unfortunately canceled by the networks. I mean,
well,
God,
no, that's not accurate.
Angel Angel was canceled, wasn't it? I mean, they should have canceled that for a Dark Shadows show.
Canceled. Angel was canceled. Buffy, everybody, it wasn't the network. I think they wanted to keep going, but Joss and Sarah and the other people making the decisions wanted to end it.
Okay.
Dr. Horrible was never a network thing, fortunately. That's a great situation where we're working with Joss and Jed and Marissa and Zach.
Oh, no, yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean Dr. Horrible, but Firefly and Dollhouse were.
Yeah, well, Firefly certainly met with an unfortunate network fate.
Good old Fox.
Yeah.
What was funny is, did you ever have a chance to meet Robin Lord Taylor from Gotham?
No.
He was at Comic-Con in Boston, and somebody brought up the Fox joke to him at his Q&A, and it's like, so Fox is notoriously known to cancel good shows just because the ratings aren't like where they want them to be, but there's an audience, and everyone laughed at the joke.
But he's a Gotham guy.
He plays Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin.
Oh, gotcha, right.
Yeah. So, and he laughed or whatever. He's like, yes, I know. This question comes up all the time. I mean, our show is doing very well, but, there's always the scare of what if it dips below like this, is that it? We were just completely off the air. So, I forget what his answer was, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
There was one independent book that came out, I think this year actually. It was by the Panda Brothers. It's called Girl Fiend.
Yeah, Girl Fiend, their vampire comic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Panders are guys that we've had a long-standing, especially Mike Richardson has had a very long-standing relationship with the Panders. They're local guys here in Portland. That was something that I think they'd been working on for a little while. When they met with Mike, showed some of it to him, and they struck a deal up at a show basically, and we rolled right into it. But yeah, they'd been working on that for a while.
That is a great that was a great one shot. I got to read a little piece of it when I was at because I finally found it at a bookstore, and I was like, oh, here it is. And I love the artwork and just the whole premise behind it and everything. And of course, I'd be remiss to mention that you guys have been the longstanding publishers of Alien and Predator, and you got a crossover coming up with Vampirella.
Yeah, how did that come about?
That's a weird crossover.
It is a weird crossover. We did a big Aliens program last year with a big sort of crossover within those properties between Aliens, AVP, Predator, and Prometheus.
Yeah, in Prometheus as well, tying it all together.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun, and that sort of like rejuvenated the program for us. And then we rolled into a really outrageous crossover, Archie versus Predator, which has actually been tremendous for us. It's been really successful and really fun. Alex DeCampi, who writes a book called Grindhouse for us, we knew we wanted to do something, really outrageous with Archie Predator because the premise is outrageous to put those two things together. So we knew that nobody could do outrageous better than Alex. So we got her to write it. And we got a traditional Archie artist to draw it. But the Aliens Vampirella crossover came about because we had set up a couple of crossovers with Dynamite, Conan, Red Sonja, and Grendel Shadow. They hold the rights to Shadow, and we work with Matt Wagner on Grendel, and Matt wanted to put the two characters together. So I was like, yeah, great. So that led us to starting to set up crossovers with Dynamite, which is how we wound up with Vampirella Aliens, which I haven't really seen much or any of it yet, but it's written by Corinna Becco, who's a writer that I'm a big fan of. So I'm psyched for that one.
I like the imagery so far. I'm still debating if I'm going to wait. I'm going to pick it up every issue or wait till it's completely collected, and then I'll see what happens.
Waiting for the trade.
The trade's just easier sometimes. I got 26 boxes of comic books sitting in my room.
I know how it is.
What's funny is I just remembered the book that you came on when you last came on the show. You were promoting Solomon Kane, which I did get around to reading, which I thought was really cool. And you talked about the Solomon Kane movie, which was kind of in script form at the time, and then it came out a few years later.
Yeah, I never saw the movie. I don't see a lot of movies. I'm like that person that you beat up at the movie theater.
I didn't beat her up.
I never wound up seeing Solomon Kane. Mike Mignola
take her side on my show.
And the actor James Purefoy, right? That's the guy who played Solomon Kane.
I believe so.
Yeah, he's really good. So man, I just think it's really hard to make a good movie.
Yeah, it's true.
I gamble my movie dollars sparingly.
Did you
happen? But I guess Solomon Kane's on Netflix, so I don't have an excuse.
It is on Netflix. I was wondering, and speaking of like good and bad movies, and I mean like really bad movies, did you by chance happen to watch The Fog before you did the comic?
No, that's the thing, man. You never get to see the movie before you do much, or even finish the comic.
Did you get the script?
No. I did get the script, and here's my excuse.
Okay, here we go.
I'm a huge fan of the original.
Yeah.
And the way it came down was just that, like, the studio approached us about doing an adaptation. They wanted to do an adaptation of the new film, The Fog. To which I said, that sounds terrible. Nobody wants adaptations, but what if we did a prequel? And they said, well, we'll get back to you. And they eventually said yes. And I read the script. And when I read the script, here's what I was looking for when I read the script. Is if I do a prequel to this script, can I really be doing a prequel to Carpenter's original? Are they close enough in plot? Because I kind of knew the prequel that I wanted to do. I wanted to do a prequel about that leper boat.
Yeah.
That came into the town. So I read the script with one thing in mind, which was, can I do the prequel I would like to do and make it serve both films? And when I read the script, I thought, yeah, I can do that. There's a couple things I'll need to do to make it line up with this one, but I can do this. And I don't know if you realize I wrote that one, but I wrote the Fog prequel, and one of my best friends this guy Todd Herman. He and I were the diehard fans of the original Carpenter film, and Todd was just sort of getting his break in comics at the time. And I said, man, if you do some killer samples and really like give it everything you've got, I think I can get you this gig. And I did, and we did that book together. And the way that it turned out, I was actually writing the script while my son was being born. My son's 10 now, and I was in the hospital writing the script while we were waiting for him to be delivered. And then it was a C-section, so in the few days after he was delivered, I was still at the hospital. And while him and my wife were sleeping, I would go down to the cafeteria and work on the script.
Oh.
So there's a lot of good memories tied up with that, working with Todd and the birth of my son and everything. But also the Rupert Wainwright, the director of the film, was incredibly cool with me the whole time. And he and I were doing a phone interview. I remember I was in a cab in New York doing a phone interview with, I think, Newsarama and Rupert Wainwright, they wanted to talk about the film and talk about the comic. And on the interview, both were done, and Rupert, of course, had read every step of the comic and seen the finished comic, but I hadn't seen the finished film yet. And in the interview with Newsarama, Rupert said that I had done a better job with the comic than he had done with the film. And I was just like, oh, don't say that. That's awful. But he said it. He was really cool to me the whole time, and he's a guy, even though that film didn't work out to his satisfaction, or anybody else's, he's a guy that I'd love to work with again. He did a really cool film with Patricia Arquette a long time ago that I liked. I can't remember what it's called, but it was a cool supernatural horror thing, and I just think he's a really good guy, and he helped make that a good experience.
Cool. I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of the Carpenter film. I went into the sequel. I went into the remake with only ever seeing the original like one time, like years ago. So my expectation of it wasn't that big. But then after leaving it, I wasn't a filmmaker. I wasn't a film critic then, and I just didn't know what the heck I just saw.
Yeah, man. I think it's the same thing with a movie like Fantastic Four. Like, because when I watched,
actually, I kept thinking that, hey, what if Clark Kent like ran around really fast and whipped the fog back out into space like he does on Smallville?
Because it was that actor. Yeah. But I remember watching that movie, and that like the screenplay that you read when they start shooting and the film that you eventually see are two really, really different things.
Oh yeah.
So I read the screenplay, and I don't remember if I liked it. I don't remember much about it 10 years later. But when I saw the movie, I saw it with the guy who drew the comic with me, and like 3 other people in the theater. I waited about a month after, or a couple of weeks after the movie came out to go see it. We go see it, and I was just like, one scene after another made no sense.
Yep.
There'd be like a momentary run-in between that main actor guy and the main girl. They'd have a conversation on the street, and then it would cut to another scene, and Todd and I would look at each other and be like, what was the point of that scene? There were so many scenes in the movie that made no sense. I wonder what went on behind the scenes that resulted in a movie like that, because it's I remember Polanski did an interview with GQ or something like that a long time ago, and this one answer was just really, really well said explanation of why it's so hard to make a good movie. There's so many things working against you that it's sort of a miracle that anything good ever gets made.
Yeah, and I mean,
and that's what I think of when I see something like Fantastic Four,
And I was like, for a minute there, I was confusing the actress, the main character, the main female character in The Fog with who's Maggie Grace, with another person who was in Darkness Falls, which is like a demonic like tooth fairy kind of movie, and you guys did a comic book for that, a one shot, and that actually stars that movie, the Tooth Fairy movie, stars the actress who played Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, Emma Caulfield.
Yes.
Emma's awesome.
Yeah, it's all connected through Dark Horse.
Yep, it's a small Dark Horse world.
But I completely forgot that was Maggie Grace in that very early in her kind of career.
That's funny because as you were saying that, I was
In fact, that was very early in her career.
When we were talking about those scenes where the male and the female characters would meet on the street, I was thinking that it was Selma Blair. I don't know how, but she's in yet a different Dark Horse related film.
Yes, the dark I can't remember the Hellboy. She's yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Maggie Grace was in
And I had only read one Hellboy comic before I saw Hellboy, and that was the original. And afterwards I started reading more, and I was like, wow, Hellboy and Liz are not an item in the comics at all.
That was entirely Guillermo. Yeah, there was none of that in the comic at all. Somebody recently somebody I was talking to said, "Oh, the Fire Girl is Hellboy's girlfriend, right?" And I was like, you've seen the movies.
Yeah, because if you watch the animated movies, there's no love interest between the two at all.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, the animated movies actually are more closely associated with the comic, with the exception of the fact the professor is alive, which then says, okay, so these prequels, because the professor is pretty much dies, right in the beginning of the original Hellboy comic as well. They got John Hurt to come back to voice him as well. Along with, they had Abe Sapien, they had David Hyde Pierce come back to play Abe Sapien, or was it Doug Jones who voiced him in the cartoon? Because I know Doug played him the human.
Doug did him in the second movie. David Hyde Pierce did him in the first one. I don't know.
Yeah, and Doug is in both costumes in the first and second one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I met Doug at a convention, and he's been on the show. Really nice guy. He's coming back to the Rhode Island Comic Con, so it'd be great to see him again. And Ron Perl. Oh my God! And speaking of Hellboy, in November we're not just going to get Doug. Ron Perlman's going to be at the Rhode Island Comic Con.
Nice.
Yes, I've always wanted to meet Ron. I'm a big fan of Sons of Anarchy, but I'm a bigger fan of his other work, going all the way back to Beauty and the Beast from the '80s.
Nice.
Yeah. Did you read his biography?
Ron wrote a biography?
Oh my God, yeah. It's called Easy Street, and it was the first time I've ever connected to an actor. He talks about like the struggles, with like it's not always like fantastic. It's not always Hellboy. It's a lot of time you're not working, and you're doing voiceover work, and voiceover work pays crap sometimes. Or he talks about his depression and attempt at suicide.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah.
No, I didn't know anything about that.
It's a great book, dude. You got to pick it up. And it was the first time I ever connected to an actor I never even knew.
Yeah.
So, I do have a question. I do have one other question from somebody. We answered the Buffy questions, and then we talked about a certain opera off the air. But Pete of That's Entertainment in Worcester, Massachusetts asks, will we ever get to see any more Kozeki Kojima manga in English through Dark Horse?
I don't. I only know what we're doing right now, and I don't know enough about manga that we're not publishing to know what else is out there. Did he talk about any titles that aren't available in English yet?
No, he just said there are. He didn't specify which ones, but he did say that there are some still in Japan that have not been translated to English by Dark Horse Manga.
Yeah, I mean that I am not knowledgeable enough to dive into that, but the thing is, like, we don't have anything in the works right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if it were only in the works and not on the schedule, I wouldn't be able to talk about it anyway.
Gotcha. No, I understand. He's just a big fan. You should see his arms. He's got Hellboy on his arm for tattoo. He's got Akira. He's got the samurai from Kojima. He's got Abe Sapien. Big Hellboy. He's a big Dark Horse fan.
Very cool.
And he's the manager of this store, That's Entertainment, in Worcester.
In Worcester?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
Well, Scott, we appreciate you taking some time to come on the show with us. I know you're probably extremely busy being the editor-in-chief and all the titles that you work on as a writer as well. But we do appreciate you coming out. We know that you're from Ipswich, Massachusetts, you said, so that's great that you're a local guy too.
Yep, up on the bay.
Awesome. Hey, Scott, thank you so much. We hope you can come back on the show later on in the future when more comes out from Dark Horse, or there's a big title that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to, man. We do a lot of horror comics. It sounds like your interests go a lot deeper than that. But the horror comics have always been sort of my focus ever since growing up in a little town with a lot of witchcraft history and discovering Lovecraft.
Oh, yeah, dude. Ipswich is famous for Lovecraft. You should come out here for Necronomicon, which is in Rhode Island in a couple weeks.
I know, yeah. There's so many conventions nowadays. There's so many
Oh, but
shows.
this isn't a convention. This is a festival celebrating the
I see.
125th anniversary birthday of H.P. Lovecraft, and it ends on like Sunday. But on Saturday they have this nice like water fire thing with all these bonfires on the river in Providence are all lit up. It's
Oh my
fantastic.
God.
Oh, dude, it's awesome. Last year I got to meet Stuart Gordon. He was here, and he
Yeah.
showed Dagon on 35 millimeter, and I got to sit with him and his wife. It was so cool.
That's my favorite Lovecraft movie. I loved Dagon. I was so
Oh,
shocked at how crazy. It's true to Lovecraft in certain ways, and then it does a lot of stuff that he would never have had any interest in. But it's so great.
I've tried to track down and I've been successful a couple times, but I didn't follow up on it very well. The tentacle princess in that movie, I got a hold of her agent to have her on the show, but we didn't connect very well, and I want to try again because now that
She's
I'm
a
thinking about it,
Spanish actress, right?
yeah, she does speak English though, so that's good,
Oh, she does.
and she can
Yeah.
do it over Skype. So, but I just
God.
let me tell you, dude, the first time I saw that movie was the 2 years ago when I sat with Gordon, his wife, and his producer. And he had just come on the show, and she's like, "Oh, Stuart just talked about you. That it's so nice to meet you. Come sit with us." And then that night, when I went to bed, I had a nightmare, and I haven't had a
Nice.
nightmare about a horror movie in years since I was a child. And I woke up and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm so freaked out!" But that's so awesome. I had a nightmare about a movie I watched.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's funny. When my son complains because I showed him something that gives him a nightmare, I'm jealous. I'm like, really? You're complaining about that? I would love to have a nightmare that woke me up. But yeah, that's what makes us horror geeks, I guess.
Oh, my
Uh,
my son complains to my ex-wife, and then I have to hear about it from my ex-wife.
yeah, yeah. We do a thing out here in Portland called the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in October.
Yes,
And
20th
it's run
anniversary.
by Yeah, it's cool. It's run by a bunch of local folks, and the program that they do for the festival, they do it it looks like a daily newspaper. It's called the Daily Lurker, and I always do a comic section for it. And we've already put it together for this year, and it's looking pretty good. Pretty proud of what we've put together.
Um, I think Jeffrey Combs is going to be there.
That sounds right. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they actually have a Kickstarter going on right now. Oh no, let me correct myself. They had a Kickstarter going on. It just ended. You could win a bunch of crap, really cool Lovecraft related stuff, including like an old, made up newspaper. And then if you went to you could also like, help their Kickstarter and get like tickets to the thing, to the festival, to the film fest. Excuse me.
Right.
So that was really cool. It just ended. There was some couple things on there I wanted to help fund, but a lot of it was mainly connected to the festival. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going because we're gonna have our own thing happening in my backyard that I can just drive to. I don't have to fly a plane out to. But it was really cool. They a lot of the perks looked really really nice.
Yeah, it's a cool bunch of folks. It's evolved over the years. The guy who founded it, Andrew Migliori, has done video distribution, and he's a terrific guy. And the team that's taken it over now does a thing called Psycho Clothing. I can't remember exactly what the name of the company is, but it's Psycho, and they do a lot of like occult and Lovecraft related apparel, and they're awesome.
Cool, man. Again, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
Yeah, thank you. We'll do it again sometime.